I just want to summarize the Help Wanted 2 update, what I think is the very most important bit of the lore drop that we got. It's not Tiger Rock, it's not the Mimic, it's the little gift shop in front of the factory is actually a huge lore drop for us. It's essentially telling us that both the puzzle and the mask came from this shop. It can't get any more blatant than to vaguely bring up gifts on one side of the store, while the other side clearly just says masks. So for them to specifically mention that they sell masks is very important. The question then becomes, how does all of that tie into the Vanny mask itself? Well, let me explain how this works quickly. So you go into the shop. We can't even use this double vision puzzle without having the mask. The puzzle's gimmick essentially relies on this mask for the fun double picture. So you'd have to buy a puzzle and a mask to actually enjoy the product, unless you really like puzzles or dressing up independently. But how does all of this tie back to the Vanny mask itself? See, originally I just assumed that the reason we could see the double image in the puzzle and then like all the other things we see at the end was because we have the AR, like Cassie's been able to see through the mask, but that doesn't work because this particular shop and the factory and all that stuff that we're seeing here is from an older time period. This is from like 1979, and the puzzle wouldn't have existed with an AR-induced mask. It would have had to have a mask that's much older in order for this whole thing to work, but that's where we're in luck, because actually this mask is old. This mask is from 1983 at the latest. And I think the update is showing us that it's actually from before 1983. That's just where we find it in 1983. So it's very likely that the mask was sold at this very shop. The first time we actually see this mask is in 1983 during a fall fest where the player goes through a Halloween maze of sorts and finds this Vanny mask. I know a lot of people assume that this is when Vanessa/Vanny finds the mask, but I strongly disagree with this if we assume that the security breach events take place far into the future from 1983, which would mean Vanessa wouldn't even be born yet unless she's way older than we thought she is. But I discussed in a previous video of mine that's really long that I thought whoever found the mask in the Curse of Dreadbear DLC is the same person we're playing as in Help Wanted 2. And if that's the case, the timeline matches up much more smoothly, especially with the fact that there's both a Fall Fest poster for 1970, as well as various references scattered throughout Help Wanted 2, connecting directly back to Help Wanted 1's Curse of Dreadbear DLC. They're very connected games. I don't know if I agree with everything that I argue about in that video, but it does have some really interesting pieces connecting the Help Wanted 1 DLC to Help Wanted 2. So I apologize for the self-promo. I just think it's helpful to visually see some of those pieces woven together without re-explaining the same thing to you in this video. It does add a lot of questions to the mix though. Just for starters, I instantly wonder like, okay, well, who runs this store? And what were these puzzles originally intended to be? Were they always going to be something more significant like they are at the end of this update? Were they originally just like a kid's toy? Or did they always have like kind of a more sinister or serious meaning behind them? Were they always intended to give the recipient a specific thing they were supposed to see? Maybe this like spurred Afton into some of his ideas for how he'd lure children. Like there's so many ways you could take it. And it seems pretty clear that like it isn't just some fun gimmicky toy. Like we're seeing there's a lot more to it. There's the whole Mexus thing. There's a ton of other questions. So a few questions I do want to ask for anybody watching is who made the masks? It's like, are there more than one? Are there a bunch? Did they sell all kinds of masks? Did they all even have this feature? Were they made from the factory that we see behind the shop? Is the shop independent of the factory? Were other FNAF masks sold here, like the ones the bullies wear, or the ones we see in the Help Wanted Trick or Treat game? Did those masks function the same as the Vanny mask? Was only the Vanny mask able to do this? Does the Mimic have anything to do with the mask? It almost seems like if the Mimic 1 virus was what originally infected Help Wanted, then it makes sense that the Mimic is connected all the way back to this 1983 Fall Fest, but likely even before that due to the Secret of the Mimic game likely taking place in 1979. And if this update is connected to that upcoming game, then I think it's very possible we see this Vanny mask again, and or possibly masks like it. And that begs yet another question. Does William Afton tie into this Fall Fest? And I think the answer to that question is yes. It's 1983 after all. We may even get more insight into William's backstory, or possibly like his family and kids and stuff as well. What I see here is the story coming full circle in a way, and I'm so excited. There's essentially endless questions we could ask. There's so many questions about like the who, the what, the why, the when, the where, what characters are going to take important roles in this 1979, how does that tie into 1983, why are there all these fall fests mentioned, is that just to reference that this character is important or that there's multiple characters going to fall fest? It's possible like all the characters we know end up going to this fall fest. Like there's so many ways they could take the story, and they're definitely going to need more than one game to tell more of that story. I know sometimes I kind of get carried away with what I'm saying, so to summarize, I just think this mask was originally sold in this shop. I think that's the reason why it straight up says masks, and the reason why we're using our mask in this little update. And so the puzzle connects directly to the mask, because the whole function of the puzzle is the whole gimmick of why people would buy it is, oh cool, when I put on this mask, I can see a different picture on my puzzle. And we know that that is probably going to be more nefarious motives than just a simple puzzle picture. Like, we obviously can see much grander things than that when we put on the mask. So, all the implications are going to be crazy. There's like so many different outcomes you can take away just from that little bit. And the Mexus ties into it all, and it's just going to be chaotic, and it's going to be so much fun because there's so much going on. And I just can't believe like how important this mask seems to be, dating all the way back to 1983. And please, if you have any questions, just ask them down below or wherever. I just love discussing this stuff. I know a lot of my like ideas aren't perfect or that well fleshed out, but it just kind of makes sense in my head at the time, so I just like to share it with everybody. And yeah, talk to you later.